Are you tired of all those fad diets, the ones that promise the world but just don't stick? Well, today we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're breaking down the science-backed behavioral strategies for managing weight for the long haul, looking at what the research actually shows us works.
So let's just dive right into the big question, right? What does science really have to say about losing weight in a way that's effective and, actually sustainable? This explainer is all about taking an evidence-based journey into the methods that have been proven to work.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by understanding why this is such a huge issue. Then we'll get into the core philosophy behind a behavioral approach, check out the specific tools you can use, talk about making it last, and finally, why a one-size-fits-all strategy just doesn't cut it.
Okay, first up, let's set the stage. Obesity isn't just a personal issue, it's a massive public health challenge. And that's exactly why finding strategies that are effective and sustainable is so incredibly important for everyone's health. And if you want to understand the stakes, just look at this number. 58%. A landmark study found that a lifestyle intervention, we're talking modest weight loss from diet and exercise, slashed the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by that much. It's just staggering. This shows it's not just about the weight, it's about profound, life-changing health benefits. So, how do we get those benefits? Well, it starts with a pretty fundamental shift in thinking. The core idea here is that our eating and exercise habits, they aren't just character flaws. They are learned behaviors. And the good news is anything that's learned can be modified and relearned for better health. This whole approach is grounded in something called social learning theory. And the most crucial point here is that this is not about blaming people for a lack of willpower. Not at all. It's about systematically applying learning principles to change behaviors and, this is just as important, to change the environmental triggers that drive those behaviors in the first place. And we know this works because these strategies have been tested and refined for decades. Just look at this timeline. You can see a really clear trend. As treatment programs got longer and more intensive, going from just 8 weeks in the 70s to over 20 weeks by the 90s, the average weight loss more than doubled. The data is crystal clear. Longer support leads to better results. This brings us to the really practical side of things, what I like to call the behavioral toolbox. See, the best programs don't just rely on one single trick. No, instead, they use a whole collection of tools, a set of strategies that can be customized to help a person build new, healthier habits. So here's a quick look at some of the most important tools in that box. You've got self-monitoring, which is all about awareness, stimulus control for changing your environment, goal setting to keep you motivated, social support, which is huge, and cognitive restructuring, which helps you change how you actually think about this whole journey. Let's zoom in on a couple of these key strategies.
Let's start with self-monitoring. Now, it might sound almost too simple, but believe me, this is one of the most powerful and effective strategies out there. Just the simple act of tracking what you eat and how you move shines a huge spotlight on your habits. It's absolutely the first step because you really can't change what you can't see.
Now, what about physical activity? The research really compares two main ways to go about it. You've got your structured exercise, like, hitting the gym, and then you have lifestyle activity, which is all about weaving movement into your daily routine. And for long-term success, it turns out that this lifestyle activity often wins. It just promotes better consistency over time. Okay, so you've used the tools. You've lost some weight. Awesome. But now comes what for so many people is the hardest part, keeping it off. So let's look at the strategies designed specifically to make these changes last and to help prevent relapse. This slide breaks down two key strategies for maintenance. On one hand, you have relapse prevention, which teaches you to cope on your own. On the other, there's problem-solving therapy, which involves ongoing contact with a professional. And the research finding is pretty clear. That continued guidance you get with problem-solving therapy, well, it's been shown to be superior for long-term success. That consistent support really matters.
So, of course, you start to wonder, can technology fill that role? People have definitely tested using the internet to maintain that contact. But honestly, the results so far are kind of mixed. Some studies found that internet support was just as good as face-to-face, but others found it wasn't nearly as effective. So the jury's still out on how to best use tech here.
And that brings us to a really critical final point. There is no magic bullet. There's no single program that's going to work for everyone. For treatment to be effective, and frankly for it to be ethical, it has to be adapted to the individual's unique life, their culture, and their circumstances.
And a huge piece of that is understanding the psychosocial burden. This quote from the source really highlights the painful stigma that so many people face. Clinicians have to be sensitive to this because a history of being discriminated against or being teased, it can lead to frustration and low self-esteem that just completely undermines progress.
So a successful plan has to be tailored. It absolutely must account for cultural factors, for different motivations. It has to be safe and medically sound, especially if someone has other health conditions. And it has to consider a person's history to build them up, not tear them down.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? What's the bottom line? Well, the most effective strategy seems to be a three-part harmony: a healthy diet, more physical activity, and behavior therapy. But, and this is a big but, for it to actually work in the long run, that combination has to be sustained with ongoing support and carefully tailored to the real life of a real person. And that leaves us with one final, much bigger question to think about. We focused a lot on individual behavioral strategies, and they are incredibly powerful. But if behavior is the key, then what needs to change in our environment, in our communities, our workplaces, our food systems, to make the healthy choice the easy choice for everyone? That's something to chew on.